Greetings, everybody, and welcome to yet another ball publishing webinar. I am Chris Beytes, editor of GrowerTalks and Green Profit magazines and the e-newsletter Acres Online, and I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so as we tackle today's topic, bringing impatiens back, tools for controlling downy mildew in production and the landscape. Now, I can tell you, as a journalist, and just for anybody in the industry, it was big news and it was sad news when we first learned about this disease that came to be known as impatiens downy mildew. And it seemingly came out of nowhere, wiping out our number one bedding plant crop, Impatiens walleriana. I can tell you that sales of the crop dropped anywhere from 30 to 70% in the affected areas. And some retailers, you may be some of them out there, stopped selling them altogether. But now we've got good news. Not only are the chemical controls getting better and we're learning more how to use them, we now have genetics that are resistant to the disease. And today we're going to talk about both of those topics. Now, as usual, I'm not the expert on the topic, although I have done a lot of reporting on IDM and on the new impatiens, so I feel pretty well versed on the topic. But who are the real experts? Well, today I've got two of them for you. The first is a veteran of my GrowerTalks webinars. She is Nancy Rexegel, Field Technical Manager for Syngenta on the chemical side of the business. Welcome, Nancy.
Welcome. Hello.
Nancy, and we're doing an interesting little bit of an audio kind of a thing with Nancy where she's actually coming through my speakerphone into my microphone out to your computers. The magic of modern technology. There's a long story behind that one. But Nancy, where are you broadcasting from today?
I'm down here in sunny Bradenton, Florida.
Oh, be still my beating heart. We won't even talk about the weather. How about that? Let's go slightly further north, I think, to our second guest expert today, who's on the flower side of the Syngenta business. He is Dr. Jamie Gibson, the technical lead for Syngenta Flowers. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. And Jamie, you are, what is a technical lead for Syngenta Flowers?
We are supporting grower trials, grower support, and engaging on all technical aspects of the genetics side of the business.
Very good. And where are you broadcasting from today?
I am broadcasting from beautiful southern Maryland, just south of Annapolis on the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay.
Ah, there you go. As a matter of fact, I'll be there in a couple of weeks giving a presentation. Just order up some decent weather there for the Baltimore area, would you?
Will do.
All right, but for now, your faithful host is working the controls from high atop the Ball Publishing broadcast studios, and we're working with a new system that will hopefully eliminate some of those bugs we had in the old one. In fact, this new system comes with live help. And so all you need to do is click on, if you're having any kind of technical issues, can't hear, see, or whatever, click on the resource area. There's a link that takes you to a test your connections page. And Nina, the WorkCast producer, is standing by to help you out if necessary. If you have questions about impatiens downy mildew, Nina cannot help with that, however. So now, if you have questions as we go along for Nancy or for Jamie, use the question area that you see on the side. I'll field those if they're pertinent to the topic at hand as we go along, and we'll get those answered. We'll save some time at the very end to get to any others, and I'll even provide some contact information if we can't get to all the questions out there. Now, if you have to leave early for some reason, if you want to watch the webinar again, or if you want to share it with colleagues, because I know it's going to be a good one, it will be archived as soon as I can manage after the webinar is over at the same place you signed up, growertalks.com/webinars. And Nancy, I think you're going to be leading the way from now on, right, through this first half of the presentation?
Yes, that's correct, Chris.
All right, well, take it away.
Okay, let's see. Okay, is the first slide coming up yet?
We've got it. We've got it.
There's a little bit of a delay. Okay. All right. Well, impatiens downy mildew has been one of the most significant diseases to infect ornamental production in the past 2 decades. While the pathogen has been in the country since the late 1800s, its activity has been rather quiet until the spring of 2004. And during that year, it was reported in 8 states, ranging from California to West Virginia. After that, things were sporadic until 2011. And then all of a sudden, impatiens downy mildew, or IDM, really became rampant and went throughout many states throughout the U.S. and many continents. And in the short period of 2 to 3 years that followed, one of the most popular bedding plants across the globe quickly became a rare commodity. So in 2011, we began mapping the movement of the disease as it was observed and reported. And by 2013, you can see the reports had expanded to cover over half the U.S. And by 2014, almost 3/4 of the country had reports of the disease. Of course, we never had reports from North or South Dakota, Montana, Utah, or Idaho, but perhaps their gardening season was too short. Nevertheless, IDM was something to be reckoned with in many of the U.S. states. So from a historical perspective, I think these maps illustrate how quickly a problem can spread if it's not managed properly. And today, we really get a very few reports of IDM. We do see it from time to time in the greenhouse and sometimes in the landscape, not to the extent that we saw it in the past. However, it's important to note that the disease has not totally gone away, but the impatiens market is not as robust as it used to be. And with that, we have kind of an interesting slide showing the North American impatiens market. Jamie?
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. So if you look at this overall graph, the trend in usage for those first 10 years of the millennium, we had a downward trend in the use of impatiens. And we saw that for the most part, these plants were being bumped up into larger containers. There was less pack usage. And we also saw a rise in some of the other genetics that do well in shade. So,
Jamie?
Nancy, you're not able to hear Jamie?
I can't hear Jamie.
Oh, well, he just finished his presentation, so go ahead on that slide anyway.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear. All right. Okay, so from a distance, IDM can be mistaken for a lot of other problems, including foliar spray injury, nutritional deficiencies, chilling, and even spider mite infestations. When you look closer at the undersides of the leaves, plants that are infected will typically reveal the downy white sporulation that is common with this disease. It's important to note that you can have symptoms that are delayed also because of the climate and the temperature. If it's warm, sporulation may slow down. The disease may not progress as quickly, but once you get back into those into the right conditions, it can spread like wildfire. Now, it's important to also note that there's other problems that impatiens can have that mimic early signs of impatiens downy mildew. Nutritional deficiencies, as I mentioned before, root rots can cause plants to be weak, limit nutrient and water uptake, and so their leaves are more yellow of color. They don't expand properly. That can look like downy mildew. And then fungal leaf spots like alternaria can also cause leaves to turn chlorotic, especially if there's a lot of leaf spots. And plants can defoliate because of that disease as well. So there are some other things out there that can look a little bit like downy mildew. So you have to have a closer look. So downy mildew, including IDM, is caused by an oomycete, Plasmophyllus abducens, and which thrives in cool, moist conditions. Typically, they like in the mid-50s to the 70s is really the conducive conditions for impatiens downy mildew, or many of the downy mildews that we have. But it's important to know that in warmer places like Florida, when temperatures get up into the 80s, you can still see the disease. You still can have sporulation present on the underside. the period between infection and sporulation happens really quickly under optimal conditions. It could be as close as 5 days or 14 days starting a new infection. So the disease produces aerial spores called sporangia. That's what you see on the undersides of the leaves, and they're released in response to light, temperature, and humidity. And so they move very easily through the air, and also with water, they can move downward into the soil. Those spores are released from these sporangia, and that's the primary spores which cause the infection. They can swim and then also start a new infection, either in the foliage or also in the roots. So, as I mentioned, sporulation may not always occur if the temperatures are dry and warm. They can still be infected, so sometimes you may not know that a plant is infected. But it's really ultimately the oospores that are responsible for the survival of this disease in the soil. They're formed in the leaves, stems, and also in the roots. And can stay there. There's evidence now, research that was done at Fort Detrick, USDA lab, that showed that both the zoospores can overwinter up to 5 degrees, and they will germinate and infect through the plant roots and move up, causing new infections. So young plants can be vulnerable to infection, so it is very important to scout plants carefully and begin your plant protection programs early. I can't stress that enough. Now, over the years, fungicide screening and IDM trials ramped up very quickly in 2011. And they continued with great intensity over the next 4 to 5 years across many parts of the country. This is a picture from the Cream Ridge Research Station in New Jersey showing one of the IR4 trials that was in progress in 2012. Many products were trialed over several years to evaluate their efficacy and consistency in performance. We learned a lot from these trials. We identified fungicides from different FAC codes that are critically important in preventing downy mildew, particularly those products in FAC groups 4, 33, 43, 40, and of course those with multi-site activity, and also some of the strobulurins. We learned about the strengths that systemics can provide in a management program, and also the important role that topical applications play in controlling the disease as well and preventing resistance. Unfortunately, we also learned how easy it was to induce resistance when you carry over inoculum year after year, and control is provided by a single AI alone. We saw this occur across nearly all the products that were trialed. These trials were really helpful in producing programs and recommendations and basically rotation programs so that growers could successfully grow impatiens and manage this disease. There's a bit of a lag time. I apologize for the slides. So research on IDM and fungicide testing programs are continuing today. And as a result of this work, new active ingredients with activity on oomycete diseases are being identified. And the newest tool in the fight against downy mildew is Segovis. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this product today. So Segovis is a new active ingredient from a new class of chemistry. It's in FRAC group U49. The active ingredient is oxythiopiperine, and it's very unique and in a novel class of chemistry, which is what we needed for a good solid rotation program. It has a 4-hour REI and no signal word, so it's very easy to use in production. There's not a lot of restrictions. Application rates are very low. Foliar sprays are from 0.6. Those are really meant for seedlings, young seedlings, up to 2.4 fluid ounces. And drench applications really go up to 3.2 for the herbaceous, and you're allowed a little bit more leeway for in-ground plants. It is labeled for greenhouse use, outdoor nursery, and also in commercial landscape. So it is a very flexible and easy tool to use. One of the nice things about Segovis is that it is systemic, and it has a very narrow focus of activity. It works on oomycete diseases, but specifically downy mildew and Phytophthora. And being in a new class of chemistry, there is no cross-resistance with anything else that is already on the market. And being systemic is really helpful because you get the protection from the roots all the way up to the top as a drench, and also as a spray. It also has some unique characteristics. So Segovis targets downy mildews at several different sites in the life cycle, and really the important ones. It helps stop sporulation. It helps stop the germination of the zoospores, and also helps prevent infection, new infection sites for developing. So it really does affect the downy mildews at several critical stages in the life cycle. It also has some unique characteristics. In addition to being systemic when applied to the soil, it also has systemic capabilities when applied as a spray. And this is a study that was conducted in the UK on tomatoes, looking at the movement and protection of Segovis against Phytophthora. And so Phytophthora can be a real problem on tomatoes. And so what they did was, in the top picture, they made the application when the plants were at a small stage, and there's actually a little red tie where you can see where how much foliage was there at the time of the application. Down below, you can see the untreated non-fungicide controls to the right that have died after 17 days. Plants are looking quite good at 17. And over here to the right at 34 days, you can see these plants are really looking quite robust. And so even with one spray application made early, it was able to absorb through the stem and move upward, protecting foliage that wasn't there at the time of the initial application. But getting it to the stem is critical. So that was a trial that was conducted on tomato, but we do see the same results in ornamentals. And this is showing control of Phytophthora, aerial Phytophthora on vinca when applied as a spray. And this test was conducted using a known subdew-resistant strain of Phytophthora. So this is basically an acid test to see how well the different fungicides would hold up. And you can see there that really only Macora at the 8-ounce rate and Segovis at that higher rate of 2.4, plants were completely clean 22 days after treatment, where you can see all the other treatments were breaking. So that was as a foliar spray for Phytophthora, but we also see similar results with downy mildew. So this slide is a trial that was conducted on impatiens. The sprays were applied twice on a 14-day interval, and then evaluated again over the next 14 days. And you can see that again, Segovis is one of the stronger products that is providing at 2.4 complete control of downy mildew. And I can tell you that this trial did go on a bit longer. We left it go out for 4 weeks, and that high rate of 2.4 kept the plants clean for 4 weeks. But 4 weeks is really not long enough if you're looking at plant performance in the landscape. And so we've also conducted trials as a drench, comparing it with Adorn, and we compared it with some experimentals. And again, this was on a known subdew-resistant strain. And you can see going out for 52 days, the plants remain clean. So we knew we had another systemic tool that could be used along with Subdue, Adorn, in order to manage this disease systemically. The next slide is showing just that. It was a trial on rose downy mildew with Subdue applied as a drench. and you can see both the 1 ounce and the 3 ounce rate of Segovis. The plants had a pre-existing condition of downy mildew already. It's a bit of a woody plant, and you can see that all products were keeping the disease at bay when applied systemically as a drench. So, taking this to the impatiens, trials have been conducted looking at how Segovis would work protecting some of the impatient varieties that we currently have on the market. And you can see this is 12 weeks after the application that Segovis at 1 and 2 fluid ounces were keeping the plants looking really rather nice 12 weeks after. You can see the untreated control there on the left. The next slide just shows the progression of the symptoms over the 12-week period. I put Segovis in at the 1 ounce rate so you can see how it looked. It was 5 weeks, and after that it was like 7.5, then 9, then about 10.5 weeks. And you can see the plants are holding up quite well. I put Macora in there as well. We would not expect Macora to hold up for the full 12-week period. Macora is in frac group 40. It is a product that you would spray. It binds to the waxy cuticle and then slowly moves in, providing protection. So as a topical spray, it works quite well. And here you can see that, even 6 weeks in, that spray in 7.5 is really providing some really nice protection. Obviously not a standalone, but certainly one of the strong tools that can be incorporated in the rotation program for controlling this disease. Now, as Chris mentioned earlier, we do have some new genetics that have been bred to be resistant or more tolerant to this disease, and that's our Imara XDR. And this is just a picture of Imara untreated versus with Segovis compared to some of the other genetics that are on the market. And you can see what a nice job that Segovis does in assisting with keeping the plants looking nice and healthy during the 12-week period.
Nancy, while we're here, we've got one question that just popped up from Steffi, who was inquiring about the previous slide when you were showing the water patients. Was that a spray or a drench?
Drench. These are all drench applications. Spray applications of Segovis will last about 4 weeks, but drench applications will take you all the way home, and that's what hopefully you'll see today through these pictures.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Those are drench applications. Mm-hmm. So now downy mildew is not the only problem that can occur on impatiens. We know that impatiens can get, my slides are bouncing around here. Impatiens can get other issues. They can get leaf spots like alternaria. They can have thrips that come in, bringing tospoviruses. You can have root and stem rots. So there are some other things. And so I put together an agronomic program for impatiens that takes into account all the potential problems that you could have on impatiens. It's nice to select at least 2 or 3 products that have good activity on these problems, and I like to list them down because that makes for a robust rotation program and some good resistance management. So when you put these together into a program approach, I came up with a slide that looks somewhat like this, and it's built depending upon how, what size container that you are growing, because the crop time is going to vary. The target diseases and pest problems are listed to the right. The FRAC codes are listed in order so that you can not overdo or overuse any one product or FRAC code, so you can stay in compliance. And really, the following rotation is really to be used as an example for controlling diseases not only downy mildew, but some of the other problems that you could get on impatiens and perhaps other bedding plants. The program utilizes a systemic sandwich approach where systemic fungicides are applied as a drench at the beginning of production, like a transplant, and then prior to shipping, 1 to 2 weeks prior to shipping. And then there's other products that are in between that provide protection, topical protection, and some translaminar activity, not only against downy mildew, but against perhaps some of the other problems that you could encounter, like botrytis or alternaria. So the use of systemic products as a drench prior to shipping is really important to provide the extended protection out in the landscape for the consumer, because we know that poor performance in the landscape is what really took its toll on the impatiens market. People are not going to want to buy something if it's not going to hold up in the landscape for at least 12 weeks or so. The sprays that are applied in between the drenches are part of the resistance management strategy to take the pressure off controlling the products that are providing the systemic protection. So you don't need all of these tools, but again, based on what your disease pressure is, if you're having some alternaria pop up or having some botrytis issues, you may want to include, or thrips, for instance. It just lays out the different FRAC codes positioned in the way to make them work the best and to give you the most success. So that's for greenhouse production. But we also have some tools that landscape managers need to consider for impatiens. And one of those tools is Subdue Granular. And this is a great product. It's granular. You can incorporate it into the soil as a soil surface treatment. And it provides the extra protection that you need to ensure that garden performance. Can be used for coleus, the vinca, impatiens, and other susceptible crops. It's fairly economical and easy to apply. And where that can become really important is for those corporate centers that want to plant, hundreds and hundreds of impatiens in the front, like there used to be many years ago. A Subdue G granular incorporated into the bed or topically applied will ensure success for the season. So we did look at this a number of years ago, and some of you may have seen a few of these slides, but this was a trial that we conducted down at the research station down in Homestead with Aaron Palmatier. We looked at not only different rotation programs with products for controlling downy mildew, but then we also, after we did the rotations, we took those plants and we planted them in front of the research station. And the side to the right has Subdue Granular incorporated into the bed, where the landscape bed on the left does not. And so you can see the Syngenta trials were done in the white impatiens, and then there was another trial going on that BASF was working on, and those are the white plants that you see there. So moving forward to see plant performance in the landscape, again, this was Florida back in 2012. You can see that you can look at the Subdue Granular 4 weeks after treatment. Those plants are really looking quite robust. They look really good. The plants on the left, the pink ones are holding up quite well. The white ones are starting to go down. And after 8 weeks, you can see that a marked difference between the two sides. So if you can ensure good performance in the landscape, why not incorporate the Subdue Granular and make sure that things go well? So on the right is the Subdue Granular bed. I've outlined in the blue, you can see little boxes, and that just shows you those are different rotation programs that set of plants were on prior to planting them in the landscape. And they were duplicated on each side. So you can see that some rotations actually really worked quite well. And even 8 weeks later, even without the Subdue Granular planted in the bed, they were really holding up quite well. But certainly the plants were more robust on the other side. So this past year, we had the opportunity to go to Ground Zero, and we went up to Saratoga Springs, New York, and this was at the site that downy mildew was first found. I think it was back in 2010 in the summer. And we went back to that location and did a similar trial. In this case, what we were doing was, the objective was to look at the performance of Segovus as a drench for protecting impatiens against downy mildew once it was in the landscape. And so we also did that with and without subdued granular, incorporated it into two sides of the bed. So there's a schematic there that kind of shows you how things were set up. We looked at Segovus at 1, 2, and 3 fluid ounces per 100 gallons. We also had plants that did not get Segovus. These were super elfin white and purple impatiens from a grower in upstate New York. And you can see how they were planted. They were kind of planted in kind of a design there. The tree is what you see in the background. That side, that half had the subdued granular incorporated into the bed. The front side did not. So going forward, we found some interesting results. My first visit there was in August, early August, and there was already downy mildew on the property in several locations. However, there was no downy mildew in any of the plants in this small trial bed. The first sign of downy mildew was found just a week or so later in the non-subdued GR and no Segovus treatments. And then it began to show up again in the no Segovus treatments on the side with the subdued GR. As it progressed 11 weeks later, we started to find a little bit more of impatiens downy mildew in the plot, and we took it out for 15 weeks. And so really pictures are worth 1,000 words, so we'll just get right to some of the pictures, which are kind of interesting. So this is 11 weeks out in September, and you can see it's kind of a progression. So this side of the bed did not have any subdued granular incorporated into the bed. And you can see that there's no Segovus, and you can see we lost the plants there with no Segovus. To the right, you see plants, you see white plants that look quite healthy. That actually is in the subdued GR part of the bed with the 3-ounce rate of Segovus. But moving to the left, you see Segovus at 1 ounce, looking really good. And again, if you move along, you can see the plants are looking good. 2 and 3 ounce rates are still completely clean. There's no downy mildew on those treatments. So now going to the subdued granular side, you see, again, this is starting to lose some of the plants in the non-Segovus treatments, but those with the 1 ounce drench rate of Segovus are looking quite nice. Again, you can see this a little bit better. I took pictures as I was going around the circle. But you can see Segovus at 1 ounce, and then the purple at 2 ounces are looking really great. It's September 2nd, 11 weeks out. Things are looking really good. Going further down the line here, again, 11 weeks out, just a closer picture of what these plants look like. At this point in time, the 1 ounce rate, there were a few leaves you can find with sporulation that was in the upper canopy, but not very many. So it was just starting to come through at that point. The 2 ounce rate of Segovus, those plants were still entirely clean and going and doing well. Now moving on to 15 weeks later, now we're in October. We're in October in Saratoga Springs, New York, upstate New York, where the temperatures were rather chilly, especially for this Florida girl. But you can see here what the bed looked like. No Segovus. The treatment were completely gone. You can see there were still plants hanging on, those that were treated with the 1 ounce rate, and those treated with the 2 ounce rate, we still had some flowers on them. The same with the 3 ounce rate. And this is a side without the subdued granular incorporated in. Continuing on, you can see with a little closer shot of what the 2 ounce rate looked like for those plants that were treated with Segovis. And again, at the 3 ounce rate. Flower, they're still flowering, they're still looking good.
And Nancy, that
Again,
15 WAT means weeks after transplant, right? So that's 15 weeks after planting.
Yeah.
So we get an idea of the life of the impatiens with this treatment. Okay, thanks.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And they were treated 2 weeks prior. So now this is, I wanted to show you really what we were seeing. And so what's really interesting about this is that the Segovis does continue to move up and provide protection. And really the only leaves that we saw sporulation on were the very, very youngest leaves at the very top of the plant. You can see there was no sporulation on the big leaf down below that. That one was still fully protected. And again, this is what we saw 15 weeks out. So now moving to the other side, looking at where subdued granular was incorporated, those plants that did not have any Segovis treatment were completely gone, as you can see by the space. The 1 ounce rate, plants were still there. They still had some flowers on them, but they were showing some obvious signs of the disease, again, in the upper part of the canopy. When you look at the 2 ounce and the 3 ounce rate, again, this is on the subdued GR incorporated side of the bed. These also looked really nice and holding up quite well. This is October 2nd in upstate New York. So really quite impressive. So we're really excited about some of these new tools that we have. And now we'll hear from Jamie Gibson on our new Imara Impatiens.
Before we do that, hold off just a second, Jamie, and we'll let you go. We got a couple of questions kind of on the things you just talked about. So let's address those, Nancy, right now, and then we'll move on. Mary Ann wants to know, and I think you've answered this question all the way through, is a preventative treatment of Segovis beneficial to do? And I think all of these are preventative treatments, right?
Yeah, so the grower applied Segovis as a drench to the plants probably 2 weeks prior to shipping. And then they were transplanted into the garden beds. So this was applied as a drench treatment, and it provided phenomenal protection. It can also be used as a spray, but the longevity of protection is not going to be 15 weeks. You're not going to see that. You'll get maybe 4 weeks.
Yeah, but if you have the disease and you try to use it as a curative, what about that?
Okay, so you can use it as a curative, but we don't necessarily want you to use it as a curative, because when you let downy mildew, because it's such a prolific spore producer, has the ability to change and mutate and become resistant very quickly. And so this is a disease that you want to prevent. You don't want to let it come in and then try to clean it up with curative applications, because that's what shortens the longevity of your fungicides. You really want to get this on preventatively. So yes, you can, but no, you shouldn't.
Gotcha. All right. Dave wants to know about basil. Is it labeled for basil, an edible crop?
Yes, actually, we recently got a supplemental label for Segovis use on basil for downy mildew. And it is a foliar application for that.
There you go. And Mark, our friend Mark, wants to know, you had mentioned a pH level that you recommended for potted greenhouse impatiens. What was that again?
Oh gosh, on the slide. Oh, well, I'm going to get back because I forgot what I listed there.
Don't slide all the way back. We'll take
no, I'm not going to go.
We'll get that.
No, but that would be about 6'2", I guess around a pH of 6'2" to 6'5". But Jamie can address that more. Mm-hmm.
All right. And then the last one, Roger wants to know, speaking of basil, what about vegetables in general and a Segovia label?
We don't currently have approval to be able to register it for use on vegetables produced in the greenhouse. So, no, unfortunately, we don't have that use available to us.
Gotcha. So only basil is the only edible right now. All right, Jamie, why don't you take it away with part 2 of our presentation?
Sure. And I'll just briefly address that pH range. Typically for production, our recommendations are the standard 5.8 to 6.2. But in soilless or soil culture or mineral soil, you can add about 0.5 of a pH unit to that level. So say a 6.5 to 6.7 is not detrimental to growing impatiens in the landscape. So I'm delighted to present some information on Imara XDR, some trial information, some educational information. And so with that, we'll move right into the materials. Impatiens Imara XDR. Some of you may have seen this at Cultivate 2018. You will definitely see it in 2019 at the summer shows. We'll have this in display at CAST. We will also have Imara XDR in several of the garden events in the summer. Our tagline is "Take Back the Shade." So just like in the graph showing you this downturn over the past 18 years, we've relatively stayed fairly static the past 5 years in usage. We're hoping to get back to those levels of 2013 and then hopefully even greater as we continue to introduce these innovative genetics as well as the chemical tools. So breeding will continue. Breeding will continue on a lot of these genetics that face the very severe pressure of Phytophthora and Plasmoptera. So this is a new class of genetics that has a high degree of resistance to downy mildew. And this was confirmed by several independent groups, one being the Research Center at Cornell, Long Island, the Research and Extension Center. So we have some trials that have been conducted there in 2017 and 2018. And with that, introducing this in the Impatiens series, very similar to other series that you've grown in past. So the ideal containers ranges from packs to jumbo packs, up to pints, quarts, quarts and a quarter, and the 10-inch hanging basket. If you think about accent impatiens, I would say that Imara XDR are very similar in terms of their garden characteristics, 10 by 12 inches. So we'll move on to the next slide and show you some of the colors that are being introduced. Currently, our North American distributor partners are carrying 6 colors plus the mix. So the orange star, the rose, the purple, and the red and white are available for production right now. The salmon shades variety, when the commercial volumes are higher in the middle part of 2019 and into fall, that particular variety will be available for commercial production volumes. The other improvements that will also be coming on at that same time for commercial production. And Impatiens Imara XDR. Well, what does the acronym XDR stand for? Informally, our grower community uses XDR as extreme disease resistance or extra disease resistance. But it does represent 3 key pieces, 3 premises. One is it's best-in-class genetics under disease pressure. It also means that it's been tested under rigorous conditions in laboratory and field settings with the presence of the disease. And it's also been tested by independent entities such as Cornell University and universities that have participated in trials in Europe and the United Kingdom. In addition to this testing, we have several pieces of literature on our website. So there's a website listed here. It's very easy to access. And on that website, you'll see various literature, such as our cell sheet, which contains the color information. You will see our culture guide. It's a 2-page culture guide that walks through propagation into production. We also have some technical sheets, which show you some of the very specific university and Syngenta trials that have been conducted using untreated plants exposed to high sporulation. The other exciting thing that we have on the website is a time-lapse video. And this was conducted by our Syngenta colleagues in the United Kingdom at our research facility in Gillett's Hill. And what those folks did is they took plugs, seedlings that were untreated, they transplanted them into finished containers, and then they placed them in the landscape untreated against some of the non-resistant varieties that are available in the marketplace. And it's very impactful. It's an incredible time-lapse video that shows you about 5 months of garden performance. And right about at the 3rd month, you begin to see those pressures. We know in the United Kingdom, with those very foliar wetness situations and cool nights, the disease really is extremely rampant. And what happens is the decline occurs so quickly, very rapidly, to sticks and then to stubs in the garden. So you can see on the left-hand side, the untreated Imara XDR still having body, presenting color and presence in the garden. From a cultural standpoint, pretty straightforward, a lot of common sense when it comes to impatiens. I think some of the 3 key principles of impatiens are transplant on time to avoid the plant stall or the plug syndrome that we sometimes see with plugs. We want to try to keep our fertility at a lower concentration of nitrogen. High rates of nitrogen are going to cause more leafy, less flowering. And one of the key principles that all of us in the grower community know is keeping it on the dry side. So if some new growers are using a little bit too much irrigation, you tend to see a more lush impatiens. So just remember, going back to those days of when we grew impatiens in large stands in the greenhouses, keeping it dry to really drive the flower power for outstanding retail sales. Just a few other points. In the culture guides, you'll have the number of plants per pot. It's pretty straightforward, much like what you've done in past with impatiens or what you're doing currently with impatiens with chemical programs. And from a standpoint of a timing program, we have some examples here on this slide showing you specific strategic times when you would want to apply some fungicides. And this is, again, standing our message of responsible disease-resistant management, really trying to promote the longevity of the chemical program and the genetics when launching this new class of genetics. So recommending Subdue Max as a plug treatment, recommending the Mycora sprays or Mural sprays during production, and then just before racking and shipping or bringing it to the garden center, trying to put on that Segovus drench to really give you the long-term garden performance that we all want well into the fall. And for our Florida growers and landscapers, well through the months of, say, February, March, and April. A few other slides here showing you some of the research, and we certainly salute our research colleagues at the Vero Beach Research Center with their really outstanding work using untreated plugs, untreated finished plants, transplanting them into the landscape during times when we know that there is a high degree of natural sporulation, but also introducing plants that have a high degree of sporulation to these plants. So, for example, this one is showing you some trials that were conducted from December 2017 with plug sowing all the way into April, where we see this shot showing you an untreated non-resistant variety on the right, presenting what pretty much happens when there's no protection applied. You get sticks and then eventually stubs and then eventually just the growing media. On the left-hand side, this is showing you the Imara XDR red. This has been an untreated plant exposed to a high degree of inoculum, showing you the body, showing you the color for giving you that garden performance. Also working with our collaborators and research partners at Cornell University on Long Island at the Research Extension Center. This is a trial that was conducted in the summer of 2018. This again was plugs that were untreated, finished plants that were untreated, and then placed in a shaded greenhouse with irrigation, and then the researcher exposed the plants to a sporulated, infected material, and you can see that by the July period, the non-resistant varieties showing you those classic symptoms of dieback, just stems and stubs, whereas the Imara XDR still showing you a body with color and vigor. We also have a second slide here showing you just 1 month later where the plants on the right-hand side that are not resistant to the disease, basically you have soil. And this is the condition that we've often seen historically. On the left side of each picture is the Imara orange improved. When we say improved, we're continuing to breed this series to look at uniformity and also improving the flower size. So several of the older selections didn't match well in terms of flower size. So we've really got this dialed down to a nice uniform series. A final trial shot, and this was a really exciting trial. Nancy's shown you some of these images already. This trial shows you a particular color. We grabbed an orange improved variety of Imara XDR against a non-resistant variety and shown you the progression over 12 weeks. 2 weeks after transplant, essentially these plants were beginning to be exposed to natural inoculum, and then the introduction of the highly sporulated stock plants surrounding the trial plot, which caused some infection over time. And you can see on the bottom panel, that entire row is showing you fairly good performance roughly until about week 7, week 8, week 9, you begin to see that collapse. Severe leaf shedding, stems, and then eventually lack of vigor, whereas Imara XDR orange improved, showing you a full body up until that 12 weeks. So we really salute our research partners and our internal researchers and how they've demonstrated the power of Imara XDR, as well as a lot of the work that's been done with fungicides. So thanks so much, Nancy, for all those research projects that you conducted. I have just a few more slides showing you how we worked with several botanical gardens south of Orlando. And I'm just going to briefly show you some of the performance. I'm going to scan these so we make sure we have some questions here at the end. But we worked with 5 botanical gardens, Naples Botanical Gardens with Imara. These were all untreated plants in the landscape. Bach Tower Gardens just south of Orlando, really nice garden beds with masses of color. Marie Selby in Sarasota, not just looking at the performance of the impatiens, but also continuing to study our new improved varieties. And the final 2 shots here, Fairchild Tropical Botanical Gardens, where we knew there was natural sporulation. You can see the Imara doing fairly well in this landscape with a high degree of natural inoculum. Hey, we even got a tweet by Kanye West at that Miami garden. So that was kind of cool. Finally, Mount's Botanical Garden. So showing you really strong beds. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nancy to give you some of our summary points. And then hopefully we'll take some questions.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. So needless to say, we are very excited about the future of patients and the garden market. Today we have new innovations in plant protection and genetics that give us the tools we need to successfully produce impatiens in the greenhouse and have them perform successfully in the landscape as well. Resistance management, though, is really critical to this success. It's important not only for the plant protection products, but also for genetics as well. Segovus, we know, is a very strong tool providing very long protection against this disease. But we do feel it's important to use that systemic sandwich approach for production, putting a systemic in the beginning and at the end with the topicals in between. Applying Segovus as a drench 1 to 2 weeks prior to ship to provide the long-term protection is really important, and we've seen the success with that type of program. And for the landscape managers, I can't emphasize enough, especially for those large corporate centers, certainly not for homeowners, but for those large corporate centers, incorporating subdew granular into those commercial beds will help ensure crop performance and is really important also for resistance management to preserve also the Segovus. And of course, incorporating resistant varieties such as Imara, incorporating those into your production program will also be important. Resistance management is just as important with plant genetics that are bred for tolerance to a disease or insect problem as it is for new chemistry. Nothing lasts forever. Resistant varieties can break, and resistant varieties are not meant to stand alone. They're meant to be used as part of a program and give us another tool to use to manage or avoid a problem and give you a successful outcome. Resistant varieties can certainly allow you to produce a crop with less inputs, and that is certainly helpful. But I think we know and we've seen today that a combination of reliable plant protection products and combination of these new genetics can help you grow and sell impatiens again. So let's take back the shade.
Well said, Nancy. And I think if I move forward here, we've got a little disclaimer there, fine print. And now we do have some opportunities for questions, and we've got a few here, and I think a few more will definitely come in. Let's see, Mary Ann wants to know, and of course this is for either of you who want to tackle it. Was there testing of Subdue Max with Segovus as a combo mixture instead of with the granular Subdue? Subdue Max instead of granular Subdue.
Yes, but the beauty, yes, and you can certainly put those two together, and that's a very strong resistance management combination. For the landscape, though, the landscape maintenance people, it's much easier for them to incorporate the granular products into the landscape, much like they would with fertilizer. So the landscape maintenance people kind of prefer the granular formulation. The granular also provides another advantage in that being granular, it's somewhat of a slow release. It doesn't come out right away when you transplant into those beds. Those roots grow out, and over time, with the moisture, the methanoxam, the active ingredient, is released and then absorbed by the roots. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a slow release type of protection as well.
All right. Now, I had a question, and several people have weighed in on the same topic. Jamie, maybe you want to address this, or maybe both of you, and that is the use of Segovus with Imara, with the resistant variety. Is that an essential part of the resistance of Imara, or will Imara be resistant on its own without fungicides? What's your take on that, at least as we stand right now?
So in all of the trials that we've conducted, we've done untreated plants. We knew we wanted to have that data set, but going back to this principle of disease-resistant management for our industry, not just for the genetics, but for the chemistries, we highly encourage the use of chemicals to be responsible, not only for production, but also for the landscape. I'm not sure, Nancy, if you have any additional comments.
Well, again, I'll say what I said before. As a plant pathologist, resistant varieties are not meant to be standalone products, even in agronomic systems, bred for resistance. And that means that you can apply less fungicides or less insecticides because of the resistance. They're more tolerant. But resistance breaks. Resistance is not forever. It breaks with chemistry and it will break with genetics. And so to be a good steward of both of genetics, it is important to have some sort of protection program along with that. It just ensures your success. It ensures the longevity of the genetics in the market so that it doesn't break. And it just is good common sense. So they go hand in hand. You certainly can produce more tolerant varieties with less input, for sure. But as a standalone, none of these are meant to be standalone.
And then, Mark, you did confirm, Jamie, you confirmed for Mark that those trial plants did not receive any fungicides. Those were untreated during their production cycles, right?
Correct. And when we do those types of trials, it's done. They're done with fungicides as separate sub-blocks, but we also want to investigate with a full untreated, all the way from the plug to presentation into the landscape for exposure to natural inoculum or introduced sporulation. I think overall we're feeling that Imara XDR and this class of genetics, certainly we recommend these chemistries for just good stewardship in our industry and the promotion of the genetics and performance long term. Just demonstrating the success, like Nancy had really encouraged, is if we can show our consumers and our commercial landscaper having greater success, bringing this genetics back to the landscape is a win-win for our industry.
All right. Along that same line, Nicole wants to know, with the Segovia subdue program, has there been any sign of decreased effectiveness or resistance since we're not able to rotate those chemistries?
Not when they're used in a program approach. What we saw in research trials that we conducted, that when you are testing a product solely, a single active ingredient, and you're looking at it year after year, and you're carrying over the inoculum year after year to be able to test, continue with your testing, it's that type of pressure that produces the resistance, and that's how you get resistance to develop. It's usually can be very localized. It's not widespread. It can be widespread if you start sending partially infected plant material around the country. But no, when you have a robust program, it actually works quite well. In the agronomic program that I posted, I do start with Subdue Max first, not just for Pythium control, which it will provide great Pythium and Phytophthora control, but systemically it gets in there and it provides the protection early. And whereas the Segovia is providing the systemic protection later. And again, for those corporate centers, you've only used Subdue once before. So, incorporating it into the bed, we've not had any issues. And you saw by the pictures, we just see excellent performance.
Okay. Any phytotoxicity? Joel wants to know about Segovus on the open flowers.
No, we've not had any phytotoxicity with Segovus at all, even at the 3-ounce rate. We've not seen any with Segovus. It's actually has good plant safety.
Okay, that's good to know. I was curious. I have a couple of questions myself. This is for you, Jamie. Are Imara in any way more susceptible to the disease when young, before they become established, or are they just as highly resistant as a young plug or a fresh, 4-inch or pack plant going out into the landscape?
Yeah, I can speak from the production trials that we've conducted. Given any native inoculum, open-sided greenhouses, production houses that have pretty much had chemical controls, we really haven't seen any impact from the plug side of things or the production side of things. Typically, you will begin to see the impact on the plants when they're installed in the landscape, and by trend, and this is only by the observations, basically the scientific observations that we're seeing, untreated Imaras will tend to show some impact of the disease about 6 weeks into the garden. And this is primarily with trials where we've actually had exposed inoculum, replicated inoculum, not the natural inoculum. So but again, we recommend those subdue treatments in the plug stage. We recommend, or Segway could be used as another type of drench on the plugs. But Mycora, Mural are good chemical rotations in production.
If you have more questions, here are the emails for Nancy and Jamie. And I'll leave that slide up just for a second there. It's pretty easy. It's their full name, Nancy Rexigel at Syngenta.com, and James Gibson, James.Gibson at Syngenta.com. If you really want to follow, we didn't get to quite all the questions. I apologize about that. So that said, we really want to thank you for attending today's webinar. And on behalf of Nancy and Jamie and all the fine folks at Syngenta and Syngenta Flowers and all of my peeps here at Ball Publishing who work hard so I don't have to, this is Chris Beytes saying so long, everybody.
Thanks, Chris.